You see the room you once inhabited as a child, the walls subtly taller than you remember, the light falling differently, carrying unfamiliar shadows, the air carrying scents that your adult nose strains to identify, a fan humming in a rhythm that is no longer yours to hear. Your younger self moves through the space in fragments, gestures half remembered, words half recalled, laughter or conversation fading into nothingness. Yet even as you reconstruct this scene, it strikes you that it does seem to still feel fully real. It feels like a dream, not a fantasy invented in the mind, but a softened, distant, unstable version of reality that slips through your consciousness the moment you try to clutch it. The question arises, why does something you lived that once existed in absolute immediacy now appear to you as ephemeral, as though it were woven from the same gossamer threads as the dreams of the night? According to the worldview offered by Richard Feynman, one of the most rigorous and unflinching observers of reality in modern physics, the answer is neither psychological nor metaphorical. It is deeply physical. It is embedded in the very fabric of the universe and in the nature of time itself. Time moves in one direction. This seems obvious, trivial even, but beneath this self-evident fact lies one of the most profound structures of reality. The arrow of time. We remember yesterday, we cannot remember tomorrow. We age forward, never backward. We see objects decay, eggs break, smoke dissipates, ice melts, and children grow, never to return to the exact configuration of molecules they once were. Yet at the microscopic level of atoms and particles, the fundamental equations of physics, the ones governing motion, electromagnetism, quantum states, are largely indifferent to the direction of time. A video of atoms colliding would be just as valid if played backward. No law of motion prohibits this reversal. The universe at its most elementary level does not care about past or future. And yet at the macroscopic level, reality flows irreversibly, violently, inexorably forward. Eggs do not unbreak. Buildings crumble. Children grow older, never younger. Why this divergence? Entropy. Entropy is disorder. It is the measure of how arrangements of matter naturally disperse into less organized, higher probability states. Entropy ensures that the world is not a static stage, but a river of transformation, relentless and absolute. The past feels dreamlike because the configurations of matter that once comprised it, the exact molecules of your body, the furniture, the air, the light patterns, have dissolved into higher entropy states, never to reassemble. The room you remember is gone, not lost metaphorically, but physically disassembled at the most fundamental level. There is no preserved blueprint anywhere in the universe. Nothing remains in the configuration that was once present. The moment is irretrievably transformed. Memory does not function as a storage device. It is not a camera capturing frames with precision. It is a reconstructive process. Neural circuits fire and pattern synapses, strengthen or weaken memories are generated as present state reconstructions from fragments of prior experience. When you recall an event, you are not retrieving a pristine record. You are generating an approximation, a model that your mind stitches together from the residue of earlier interactions. With every recall, slight distortions accumulate. Like a photocopy of a photocopy, details blur, context shift, emotional tones warp. Over decades, these distortions render memories dreamlike. The room is remembered, but it is smaller. The light is altered. Your emotions color what you once felt differently than you did at the time. What you perceive as memory is not reality. It is a present-time reconstruction, a hologram of the past projected by an evolving neural network. The more time passes, the thinner the reconstruction becomes, the less detailed and tangible, the more it approaches the quality of a dream. This process is compounded by the universe's indifference. There is no cosmic archive in which the past is preserved. Classical physics grants no privilege to yesterday. Particles, energy, matter, all are in constant flux. Arrangements once specific dissolve into broader probabilistic ensembles. Every object, every person, every conversation, every sensation is in continuous transformation, subject to the laws of thermodynamics, moving from specific to generalized, from order to disorder. A child speaking in your memory involved trillions of particles interacting in precise spatial and temporal arrangements. Those arrangements are now dispersed across molecules in air, in soil, in the oceans, in the atoms of distant stars. They cannot be recalled except in abstracted, reconstructed form by your brain. What remains is informational residue, fragments arranged into a coherent pattern for the survival of the mind. Hence the past feels distant, ephemeral, unreal. Identity itself is implicated in this process. You assume that the you of your memory is identical to the you reading this. Legally, narratively perhaps, but physically, continuity is pattern, not matter. Your body is a dynamic process. Cells die and regenerate, proteins are rebuilt, molecules turn over. The child you were is gone in substance only. Pattern continuity links that self to the present. That continuity, however, is neither exact nor fixed. Patterns shift, evolve, and dissolve under the influence of entropy, environmental interaction, and internal neuroplasticity. The brain itself rewires with every experience. The child in your memory is someone who once existed in that exact physical arrangement, but that arrangement has been replaced innumerable times. The past self is effectively someone else. The dreamlike quality of memory is thus not merely an artifact of perception, but a direct consequence of physical transformation. The self you once inhabited is irretrievably gone, leaving only a shadow of continuity. Memory compression amplifies this effect. The human brain is an extraordinary predictive organ, yet it is limited in capacity. Evolution favors efficiency. It stores what is necessary for survival, discarding or generalizing what is not. Repeated or emotionally neutral experiences are condensed, significant moments are emphasized. Over decades, memory pruning intensifies. The brain preserves outlines, themes, and patterns rather than precise sensory detail. The past becomes an abstraction, a narrative skeleton rather than a fleshed-out replay. These abstractions feel unreal because they are incomplete, because their reconstruction requires inference, imagination, and projection. The very act of remembering is creative. The past is therefore a continuously remade narrative rather than a static reality. Your mind generates it in the present, drawing from fragments of neural traces, emotional residues, and the ongoing evolution of consciousness.
The hero of time, the irreversibility of entropy, the reconstructive nature of memory, and the pattern-based identity of the self converge to produce a disturbing insight. Your life is not a series of preserved moments, but a flowing sequence of reconstructions. The universe does not prioritize your memories, your identity, your sense of permanence. It moves forward relentlessly. You are not stepping into a past, you are projecting a present-time model of it, filtered through a brain that has evolved, aged, and changed since that moment occurred. The light in the room you remember is gone. Its photons scattered across space, the molecules that formed your body then are mostly replaced. The neural pathways that experience the emotion of the moment are reconfigured. What persists is the pattern, the echo, the reconstruction. It is precise enough to maintain narrative continuity, but insufficient to preserve exact reality.
Even the perception of stability is a constructed illusion. The present is experienced as hyper-real, dense, immediate, and coherent because sensory input is high bandwidth, arriving in real time. Memory is low bandwidth, reconstructed, filtered, and compressed. The difference in resolution creates the phenomenological gap between now and then, the feeling that the past is dreamlike. Memory feels lighter than experience because it is necessarily a thinner, simplified, recomposed model. It is a survival-adapted fiction, functional, coherent, and sufficient for navigating the present, yet ephemeral and malleable. Feynman's physics emphasizes this without sentimentality. The universe is indifferent. There is no conspiracy of conservation to preserve yesterday, no cosmic vault in which experiences are stored. Moments dissolve, particles diffuse, patterns scatter. Entropy governs the totality of existence. Consciousness, memory, identity all exist as patterns operating within this flow, and their continuity is probabilistic, approximate, and temporary. When your childhood feels like a dream, it is because it is. Not metaphorically, not psychologically, but physically. The atoms, the molecules, the precise configuration of your body and environment that constituted reality then no longer exist. What you reconstruct is an echo, a shadow, a condensation of patterns sufficient to evoke recognition but insufficient to preserve exact reality. The past is a story generated in the present, a narrative stitched together from fragments and probability, shaped by neural architecture, by emotional memory, by the inexorable march of entropy. This understanding reframes the human condition. The fragility of memory, the dreamlike texture of the past, the shifting identity of the self are not failures. They are reflections of the fundamental nature of the universe. They reveal that existence is a continuous act of reconstruction, a dynamic process flowing within the constraints of thermodynamics, neuroplasticity, and emergent time, They explain why a distant birthday feels unreal, why a childhood home seems more imagined than inhabited, why we look back on ourselves with a mixture of familiarity and estrangement. Your memories are patterns, yourself is a pattern, and the universe is indifferent to both. You experience continuity only because the patterns are sufficient to generate coherence, not because the past persists intact. Entropy dissolves, memory reconstructs, identity shifts, and what you call the past becomes a dreamlike echo of what was once lived. There is no undoing this flow, no way to step backward into the original arrangement of atoms, no cosmic archive of precise experience. Yet within this impermanence lies a strange, undeniable beauty. Every moment, every memory, every self is emergent, constructed, alive in the present, even as it dissolves into the river of time, if time is not what you think. The strangeness of memory and the dreamlike quality of the past deepens when one considers that time itself may not be fundamental. If the past feels unreal, it may be not only because memory is reconstructive, not archival, and identity is an evolving pattern, not a fixed object, but because the very fabric of reality may treat past, present, and future differently than intuition suggests. Modern physics, especially the work of Richard Feynman, and the implications of relativity and quantum mechanics, challenges the common notion of linear temporal flow. Imagine time not as a river, but as a landscape. All moments exist in a four-dimensional continuum, like locations in space. You do not travel backward or forward along the river. You move through this continuum along a path determined by your consciousness. This is the concept known as the block universe, emerging naturally from relativity, in which yesterday, today, and tomorrow coexist as coordinates along the temporal dimension. If that is the case, then in some absolute sense the past has not vanished. Your childhood still exists. The conversation with your father, the sun falling across the bedroom floor, every particle and every configuration frozen in space-time, yet you cannot access it. Your consciousness is locked to a specific trajectory through the continuum, able only to reconstruct the past from present patterns and neural residues. The sense of loss, of dreamlike distance, arises because while the past may exist in this theoretical structure, it is inaccessible. You cannot step sideways in time to inhabit it. You can only imagine, reconstruct, and approximate.
At the microscopic level, the laws governing particles are largely time-symmetric. Electrodynamics, Newtonian motion at the atomic scale, and many quantum processes function identically if the direction of time is reversed. Feynman was fascinated by this symmetry, exploring formulations in which particles could be mathematically described as moving backward in time. The implication is profound. The underlying universe does not inherently privilege forward motion. The arrow of time, the perception of past, present, and future, is not a fundamental law but an emergent phenomenon, arising from the statistical behavior of vast ensembles of particles. Entropy, the measure of disorder, dictates that systems naturally evolve from low entropy states to higher entropy states. The arrow of time is a consequence of the impossibility of reversing these overwhelmingly probable transformations. Your memory, your perception of childhood, your sense of past experience, all emerge within this statistical entropic framework. The universe does not care that you wish to revisit a moment. It simply continues its transformation, indifferent to your narrative or your nostalgia.
Quantum mechanics adds another layer of complexity. At the subatomic level, particles are not strictly deterministic but probabilistic, described by wave functions encoding probabilities of outcomes rather than definitive states. This means that histories themselves are not absolutely fixed. Particles could have behaved in different ways, and while macroscopic events appear irreversible due to statistical dominance, their microscopic underpinnings are a cloud of possibilities. When applied conceptually to memory, it suggests that reconstruction is inherently approximate. The past is not merely inaccessible due to entropy, it is fundamentally indeterminate at the finest scales. The memory you attempt to summon is an interpretation filtered through a physical system that can only approximate past states, never fully reproduce them. This is why distant memories fade, distort, and acquire dreamlike qualities. The brain cannot recover the exact configuration of billions of interacting molecules involved in an event, nor does it attempt to. Its goal is functional to guide prediction, behavior, and emotional interpretation. Memory is predictive, not archival. You remember the shape of events to anticipate outcomes, not to relive the precise physics of a day long gone. The brain is a model-building organ. It constantly generates hypotheses about the world and updates them based on incoming sensory data. Memory is central to this predictive function. Recollections are not stored like photographs, but encoded as compressed patterns. emphasizing the elements that inform survival or social interaction. Details deemed irrelevant are pruned, emotional valence is amplified, and abstractions replace specific sensory features. Over years and decades, this compression intensifies. You retain the outlines, the warmth of summer, the sound of a teacher's voice, the fear of a scraped knee. You lose the photons of light, the exact pressure of the floor underfoot, the precise frequency spectrum of a friend's laughter. Reconstruction fills the gaps using imagination and inference, creating a memory that is coherent and emotionally resonant but thinner, less dense and less real than the original experience. The mind reconstructs the past, does not replay. This explains the haunting, dreamlike quality of distant events. They are echoes shaped by present knowledge, neuroplasticity, and ongoing emotional context. Emotions themselves rewrite memory. Every time you revisit a past event, you reinterpret it through the lens of current feelings, beliefs, and understanding. An event that was once terrifying may later seem trivial. A seemingly mundane conversation may acquire profound significance. Your present self reaches back into neural archives and reshapes them to fit the narrative coherence of your current identity. Memory is, in essence, a living, evolving system. The past is not fixed in your mind because your mind itself is not fixed. Neural networks restructure continuously. Synapses strengthen or weaken. Molecular turnover alters the substrate of cognition, and identity itself is a moving pattern. Every recall is therefore a reconstruction of a reconstruction, a reweaving of experience into a form that serves the present. The truth of the past, if it exists, is inaccessible. All you have is what your present self can recreate. Photographs and recordings seem more solid than memory precisely because they preserve low entropy configurations. A photo freezes a specific pattern of photons reflected at a moment in time, capturing a fragment of reality in a way that resists immediate entropic dispersion. Yet even photographs are partial, two-dimensional, devoid of smell, internal thought, temperature, and touch. They are fragments, yet they feel more real than memory, because physical stability is equated with reality and human perception. The same is true for video and sound recordings. Your memory, being an internally generated high-level reconstruction, lacks the fixed density of these artifacts. The past feels like a dream because it is reconstructed, ephemeral, and filtered through the impermanent fluid neural substrate of your present mind. Entropy does not merely erase the past, it transforms the present. Neural pathways weaken without use, cells die and regenerate, molecules turn over. Even identity is a dynamic emergent pattern maintained only temporarily by the continuous process of neural activity. You are not a static entity moving through time. You are a process, a pattern, a transient order within the continuous flux of matter and energy. The continuity you experience, the sense that you persist from childhood to now, is a pattern maintained by the brain, sufficient to generate narrative coherence, but insufficient to guarantee precise constancy. Your past then is dreamlike because you too are dreamlike in continuity, a reconstructed pattern, recreated in each moment, stabilized enough to perceive, but ultimately ephemeral, provisional, and contingent. This insight reframes the human experience. Memory is not failure. Identity is not weakness. The dreamlike quality of the past is not illusion, but an inevitable consequence of the physical structure of the universe and the reconstructive architecture of consciousness. The past dissolves into entropy, memory reconstructs it, and identity is maintained as a dynamic process. Your experience of continuity is real enough to function, emotionally coherent, narratively plausible, yet it is built on foundations that are probabilistic, mutable, and transient. Life is therefore a constant act of reconstruction. Every memory recalled, every emotion felt, every self-observed in the mirror is a provisional model emerging from shifting neural and material processes. There is no archive in which the past is preserved in full fidelity. There is only reconstruction, approximation, and interpretation. The past feels like a dream because in fundamental and practical terms, it is. The atoms, molecules, patterns, and configurations that constituted that reality are scattered, transformed, replaced, irretrievable. What remains is the shadow, the pattern, the informational residue, and your present mind's ongoing reconstruction of it. That is why childhood memories are hazy, yet emotionally resonant. Why early conversations appear simultaneously and alien. Why you can recall the feeling, but not the precise sound, the image, the temperature, or the precise motion. Memory, identity, and the passage of time are entangled in an interplay between entropy, statistical physics, neuroplasticity, and predictive cognition. They create a past that is real enough to influence the present, coherent enough to anchor narrative continuity, yet dreamlike, ephemeral, and forever beyond exact grasp. In this light, the dreamlike past is neither failure nor flaw. It is a testament to the delicate, emergent, and provisional nature of consciousness embedded in an entropic universe. It is the universe revealing, through the fragility of memory, the impermanence of all things, including the self, the experience, and the very moments we call life. The present self is a reconstruction too. If the past is reconstructive, dreamlike, filtered, and emergent, the question arises with increasing intensity. What then is the present self? If memories are approximations, if identity is a pattern continuously maintained rather than a static object, and if time itself may not be fundamental, then even you reading this is a reconstruction occurring in real time. Every perception, every thought, every moment of self-awareness arises as a pattern within a brain in constant flux. The neurons that fire now are composed of molecules that have turned over, of cells shaped by experience, metabolism, and environmental influence. Your consciousness is not a fixed observer, it is an emergent process, a transient organization of matter and energy operating within the constraints of entropy, neuroplasticity, and the ongoing probabilistic dynamics of your body and environment. Even the self that believes it is continuous, stable, and coherent is provisional, reconstructed from patterns that are themselves impermanent and mutable. This has profound consequences. You are living within a reality that is generated moment by the brain itself, and the continuity you perceive is not guaranteed by matter or even memory, but by the ongoing maintenance of patterns that your brain reconstructs and reinforces. Your past exists only in the present patterns of neural activity that encode traces of experience, modified and compressed, filtered through emotional relevance and survival utility. Your body is an ever-changing arrangement of atoms, most of which were not present in the body you inhabited a few years ago. Your mind is similarly dynamic, continuously rewiring, pruning, and generating new pathways. You are the same only because your brain produces sufficient continuity to convince you that you are. The self is a process, not an object. Identity is emergent, provisional, and probabilistic. Memory, then, is not a window into the past, but a tool for constructing the present. It allows the mind to simulate, predict, and interpret, not to replay faithfully. When you recall an event, you reconstruct it from fragments, sensory residues, emotional coloring, abstracted outlines, and cognitive inferences. Each reconstruction is influenced by the current state of your mind and the ongoing reconfiguration of neural circuits. Time in this sense is experienced sequentially, because entropy ensures that you can never perfectly reconstruct earlier states, and because your consciousness, a present-time emergent pattern, can only integrate past traces in a linear sequence. Yet fundamentally, the past is not preserved. It is only encoded in low-resolution, high-level abstractions that your brain can utilize. The dreamlike quality of memory is therefore a direct reflection of the probabilistic, reconstructive nature of consciousness itself. Consider identity across decades. The child you were and the adult you are now are connected only through the continuity of patterns. Every experience, every neural firing, every bodily change contributes to a shifting pattern that is sufficient to maintain coherence but is never identical from one moment to the next. The you of 5 years ago no longer exists in matter, neural configuration, or molecular composition. The you of childhood is effectively another person, linked by pattern and narrative continuity alone. Entropy ensures that matter and energy are in constant transformation. Neural circuits reorganize. Memories are reconstructed, not replayed. What persists is pattern, not substance. The past feels dreamlike precisely because it is not recoverable. It exists only as the shadow of current reconstruction. Even our experience of the present is provisional. Consciousness is generated by patterns of activity within a brain whose substrate is constantly changing. Your thoughts, perceptions, and sense of self are emergent patterns stabilized temporarily through recurrent neural networks, chemical gradients, and electrical signaling. Each instant is reconstructed from prior states and sensory input, giving rise to continuity that is functional, coherent, and adaptive but inherently ephemeral. Awareness is continuous only insofar as patterns are maintained. The sense of I is an ongoing reconstruction, a pattern held long enough to perceive itself. In this light, every moment is simultaneously real and provisional, immediate and transient, vivid and dreamlike. Brain's predictive nature further emphasizes the provisionality of self. Memory is not recorded for nostalgia or exact replay, but to guide behavior. Patterns are retained if they improve survival, social interaction, or environmental adaptation. Details that are irrelevant to prediction are pruned, compressed, and generalized. Emotional valence is amplified to preserve behavioral relevance. Over decades, memories consolidate into abstracted, compressed models, sufficient for cognition but insufficient for precise reconstruction. Identity is likewise constructed for functionality. The self must be coherent enough to navigate the world, maintain social continuity, and plan, not to preserve a perfect archive of experience. The present self is therefore emergent from this predictive reconstructive framework, a temporary stabilization of patterns optimized for interaction, survival, and coherence.
Gut.
If one considers photographs, recordings, or artifacts, the contrast becomes clear. Physical artifacts preserve low entropy patterns. They resist immediate dissolution. A photograph freezes a moment in light. A video captures motion. A recording captures sound. These feel more real than memory, precisely because they resist reconstruction and degradation. Memory, by contrast, is generated in the present, emerging from neural patterns constantly reshaped by metabolism, plasticity, and ongoing experience. The self and its recollections are always provisional. They are reconstructed models, not archives. The past is dreamlike because it exists only as an emergent echo in a present-time neural reconstruction. The emotional system compounds this effect. Memory is reshaped by interpretation. Events are reevaluated based on current understanding, new emotional states, and evolving perspectives. A traumatic event may fade in emotional intensity, while a trivial one may acquire new significance. Memory is not static, it is dynamic, constantly rewritten and recontextualized. The past is not a fixed repository, but an evolving narrative, shaped by ongoing consciousness, fluctuating neural pathways, and the emergent patterns that constitute identity. What you perceive as continuity is a constructed pattern maintained by recurrent processes, sufficient to sustain narrative coherence, but never identical to prior instances. Entropy acts as both eraser and sculptor. Matter-energy neural circuits and identity itself are subject to irreversible transformation. Cells die and regenerate, molecules replace themselves, neural connections strengthen, and decay experiences alter neural architecture. Identity is therefore an emergent probabilistic pattern rather than a fixed object. Memory and consciousness operate within this framework, reconstructing experiences from fragments, integrating them into the present, and maintaining continuity while never perfectly preserving past states. Your experience of self, your memories, and your perception of the passage of time are all shaped by this interplay of entropy, reconstruction, and emergent pattern. The culmination of these insights is unsettling and liberating simultaneously. The past is irretrievably lost in matter, configuration, and precise experience. Memory and identity are reconstructions, emergent and provisional. Consciousness is a dynamic pattern that stabilizes sufficiently to perceive itself but is never fixed. Yet this impermanence frees us from attachment to rigid narratives, fixed identity, and the illusion of permanence. The universe does not preserve errors, trauma, or failures. Entropy erases and diffuses them. Memory reconstructs, identity evolves, and consciousness exists as an ongoing emergent process within a dynamic entropic system. Life is not a static archive, but a flowing sequence of emergent patterns, each moment reconstructed, each self-provisional, each memory dreamlike yet coherent enough to function.
evolves, and consciousness exists as an ongoing emergent process within a dynamic entropic system. Life is not a static archive, but a flowing sequence of emergent patterns, each moment reconstructed, each self-provisional, each memory dreamlike yet coherent enough to function.
The final profound truth is that the past feels like a dream because it is a reconstruction, and the self is a reconstruction as well. Consciousness, identity, memory, and perception emerge from patterns of matter and energy that are themselves transient, mutable, and probabilistic. Entropy dissolves, neuroplasticity reshapes, and time emergent, statistical, and directional allows only approximation. The life you live, the experiences you remember, the person you once were, are all reconstructed echoes in the present mind, filtered, compressed, interpreted, and dynamically stabilized. Awareness exists within these reconstructions, giving coherence to a reality that is fundamentally provisional. Memory, self, and identity are not failures of continuity. They are natural consequences of a universe governed by entropic transformation, probabilistic processes, and emergent patterns. The past is dreamlike because it is an echo generated in the present. Identity is provisional because it is emergent. And consciousness is a reconstruction because it exists in a flux of matter, energy, and experience. The human mind navigating this provisional reality perceives continuity, meaning, and narrative coherence, yet at its core all is transient, emergent, and ultimately dreamlike. The present self is alive, but it is alive as a pattern, sustained moment by moment, a continuous reconstruction within the river of entropic, probabilistic, emergent time. The realization is both disturbing and liberating. Every moment, memory and self is ephemeral, yet coherence persists long enough for life, awareness, and understanding to emerge. The past is a dream, the self is a pattern, and the universe is indifferent. Yet within this transience lies the miracle of experience, consciousness, and life itself.